I'd like to work again, but I'd never been a guy who would sell his soul to get, money and fame.
$250 million at the box office. No reviews. No morning show segments. No late-night appearances. Nothing. Ask yourself, when has that ever happened to a film that made $251 million? Never. Until Sound of Freedom. Jim Caviezel made a film about child trafficking based on documented real-world events. It was delayed for 5 years. Hollywood ignored its release. It made $251 million anyway without their help. And right now, Keanu Reeves, Mark Wahlberg, and Mel Gibson are all doing things that are making the same institution deeply uncomfortable. Today, we go through all 4 of them. What each man did, what it cost them, and why their stories are converging at this specific moment in a way that Hollywood did not see coming. Everything in this video is documented and clearly labeled. Let's get into it. Jim Caviezel's path to Sound of Freedom started long before the film itself. Most people remember him from The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson's 2004 film that Hollywood also tried to kill before it became one of the highest-grossing films of all time. That should have been the first warning sign for the industry. Caviezel had already demonstrated he was willing to attach himself to projects the establishment despised, projects carrying a message the gatekeepers didn't want amplified. After The Passion of the Christ, Caviezel's career went quiet. Not for scandals, not for being difficult on set. He was simply available. And Hollywood wasn't calling.
About 4.5 years ago, 4 years ago, we showed the movie. This has been a 5-year deal. And they've done everything they could to stop it, as they did this with The Passion of the Christ.
5 years.
5 years. 5 years from production to screen. And according to Caviezel himself, the entire time there were forces working against it. Think about that. A film about one of the most universally condemned crimes in human history, the trafficking and exploitation of children, faced deliberate institutional resistance in Hollywood. The standard Hollywood response to a film like that would have been to co-opt it, wrap themselves in the social justice messaging, and take credit for the conversation. They didn't do that. They ignored it, then tried to discredit it, then watched in horror as it made $251 million without their help. Tim Ballard was the real-life inspiration for Sound of Freedom, former Department of Homeland Security agent, founder of Operation Underground Railroad, a man who had spent years doing documented on-the-ground work rescuing children from trafficking networks. He wasn't a theorist. He was an operative, someone who knew exactly how these networks functioned at a tactical level. In July 2023, at the exact moment Sound of Freedom was dominating the box office, Ballard was removed as CEO of the organization he founded. Multiple misconduct allegations. An independent law firm deployed. A swift conclusion reached. Then, years later, prosecutors quietly declined to file any charges. Insufficient evidence. No trial. No day in court. The charges didn't stick. The investigation went nowhere. But the goal, and this is worth sitting with, was never necessarily a conviction. The documented outcome was a destroyed reputation during the precise window of maximum cultural impact. And then silence. The director of the film, Alejandro Monteverde, saw what was happening and responded by creating distance, giving interviews emphasizing that the film wasn't connected to conspiracy theories, that the controversy made him feel sick. A director who watched his film gross $250 million without Hollywood's help, publicly distancing himself from the man who starred in it. That tells you everything about the environment these people are operating in. Here's the thing about Keanu Reeves that most people don't fully appreciate. He has never needed Hollywood's approval. When Fox Studios blacklisted him for almost a decade after he refused to do Speed 2, his response was not to grovel. He waited. He made the movies he wanted to make, and eventually with The Matrix, he came back bigger than ever on his own terms. 10 years of blacklisting for refusing to make a sequel he didn't believe in. And he survived it not by playing the game, but by refusing to. That is the kind of institutional independence that makes the Hollywood power structure genuinely nervous. Because here's the assumption the machine runs on. Everyone has a price. Everyone has a vulnerability. Everyone can be bought, threatened, embarrassed, or destroyed. Keanu Reeves has repeatedly, consistently, across 3 decades, proven that assumption wrong. He gave away portions of his Matrix earnings so the special effects team could receive bonuses. He took pay cuts so other cast members could be paid more. He rides the subway. He gives his lunch to homeless people. In an industry that runs on leverage, on knowing what people want, what they fear, what they will do to keep their position, a man who genuinely does not care about the trappings of fame is essentially leverage-proof. And now Keanu has become one of the most vocal opponents of deepfake technology and unauthorized CGI manipulation in Hollywood. On the surface, this looks like a simple labor issue, an actor wanting to protect his image rights. But look closer at the context. In a world where the most powerful people in entertainment already use every available tool to control narratives and suppress information, what does it mean that they now have technology that can put any words, any expressions, any actions into the mouth and body of any person on Earth? A tear he never shed. His face, his body, his performance manipulated into something he never did, never felt, never chose to express. And he's supposed to just accept that? He is one of the only people in Hollywood with the public trust and the moral credibility to stand up and name that as a problem. And he is doing it. Before Caviezel, before Ballard, before Sound of Freedom. There was Gibson. Gibson made The Passion of the Christ in 2004 against the explicit advice of virtually everyone in Hollywood. No major studio would touch it. It was called anti-Semitic before anyone had seen a frame of it. The smear campaign started before the film had finished production. Then it made $612 million at the box office on a $30 million budget and became one of the most culturally significant films of the century. And what happened afterward? Hollywood made sure everyone knew about his personal failings. Every mistake, every controversy, every moment of weakness. Amplified, repeated, used as justification to push him out of the rooms he had spent decades earning access to. But Gibson never stopped working. He kept directing. He made Hacksaw Ridge, which earned him an Academy Award nomination. And now he is circling back, pairing with Wahlberg on a project called Flight Risk, a Gibson-Wahlberg collaboration at this specific moment. With the Epstein documents in circulation, with Sound of Freedom's cultural aftershocks still reverberating, is not just a movie. It is 2 men who survived Hollywood's attempts to sideline them choosing to work together and refusing to pretend the last several years haven't happened. Mark Wahlberg is not Jim Caviezel. He is not a firebrand. He is, by Hollywood standards, a survivor. A man who rebuilt his image from the ground up and has maintained his position at the top of the food chain for 3 decades. That is not an accident. That is someone who understands the rules of the game at a fundamental level, which is why what he said matters.
I've given up many things for Lent, and I encourage people, if it's something that distracts you from your relationship with God or prevents you from growing a closer relationship with your higher power, then I would suggest giving that up. But for me, I'm just trying to do more. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to utilize the talents that I have, the platform that I have to give back and encourage people that despite where they come from, there isn't anything they can't accomplish, and trying to get people to do more and be better.
I'd never been a guy who would sell his soul to get money or fame. Not with anger, not with desperation, with the quiet calm of a man who already knows exactly what he has given up and exactly what he refused to give into. He has been open about how his faith shapes every professional decision he makes.
To be in the business you're in, and for us to be sitting here having this conversation. Does anybody ever say, any of your colleagues say, what do you get out of it? Or does anybody ever say, oh, I read about you doing all this?
Yeah. Look, I will not hide the fact that I love the Lord and that, I want to be committed to serving the Lord, but I also don't jam it down anybody's throat. But it's better to never have known God than to, deny God. I mean, that's not a good look. That's not a good look.
I don't want to jam it down anybody's throat, but I do not deny my faith. In 2024, Hollywood, where openly Christian public figures are systematically marginalized, where studios greenlight anti-religious content at an industrial scale while treating sincere expressions of Christianity as a PR liability, That statement is not small. That is a declaration. And here is what the commercial record actually shows. Sound of Freedom didn't fail. The Passion of the Christ didn't fail. Hacksaw Ridge didn't fail. Every single time a genuinely faith-driven film makes it through the Hollywood gatekeeping system and reaches audiences, audiences show up in extraordinary numbers, which means the gatekeeping is not commercial. It is not about what audiences want. It is about what the people controlling the gates want. At a screening of Sound of Freedom, director Alejandro Monteverde described something that stopped him cold. 3 times during the film, at the same specific scene, audience members spontaneously called out 2 words.
One isn't the only island out there.
They all cried out, Epstein Island. And I went, okay, now I understand what we're up against. Not a journalist, not a commentator, a regular audience at a film screening spontaneously and repeatedly connecting the story on screen to the most infamous alleged trafficking operation in modern American history. Because here is what the Epstein story makes clear. The network did not dissolve when Epstein died. The client list did not disappear. The blackmail material, the decades of compromising information about powerful people in politics, finance, media, and entertainment, none of that went away. In 2026, the Department of Justice moved forward with a mandatory disclosure involving millions of pages of files. And Caviezel, who spent years working alongside documented real-world operators in child rescue work, said something in plain language. Epstein Island isn't the only island out there. That is his documented statement. We present it as such. Here is the full picture. Jim Caviezel made a film about child trafficking that was delayed for 5 years, ignored by Hollywood, and made $251 million without their help. The man who inspired it had his reputation destroyed during the precise window of maximum cultural impact. Then prosecutors declined to file charges. Keanu Reeves has spent 3 decades refusing the leverage the industry depends on, and is now publicly naming deepfake technology as a tool of narrative control. Mel Gibson built 2 of the most financially successful faith-based films in cinema history against explicit industry opposition, survived Hollywood's attempt to destroy him, and is now choosing to work with Wahlberg again. And Mark Wahlberg, a man who understands the rules of the game at the most fundamental level, is pairing with Gibson and refusing to deny his faith in an industry that wants him to. The pattern these 4 men represent is not subtle, and the industry response to each of them follows the same documented template. The Epstein files are still being processed. The machine is loud, but it is not as in control of the story as it used to be. Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.